It's over before it really began. Rudy Giuliani pulls out of the New York Senate race against Hillary Clinton. The NRA convenes, under fire and with more money and more popular than ever. A busy season ahead for tornado chasers. We'll take you along. And it's not just Alien. Tonight, an American child is at the center of an international tug of war.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. The most closely watched U.S. Senate race in America suddenly looks a lot different tonight. The man Republicans were counting on to beat Hillary Clinton here in New York, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, dropped out today before he was officially in. The GOP appears ready to turn now to a little-known Long Island Congressman Rick Lazio to take on the First Lady. Our coverage begins with CBS's Diana Olick.
Visibly moved by an ovation from friends and supporters, Mayor Rudy Giuliani finally spoke the last lines of one of the most dramatic, unpredictable stories in political history.
I should devote the focus and attention that I should to running to being able to figure out the best treatment and not running for office. This is not the right time for me to run for office.
Giuliani, who announced he had prostate cancer just 3 weeks ago, today called himself fortunate.
Something very beautiful happens. It makes you figure out what you're really all about and what's really important to you and what should be important to you.
The man often called the bully of City Hall claimed this agonizing decision has changed him.
You confront your limits, you confront your mortality, you realize you're not a Superman and you're just a human being.
I had hoped to keep this marriage together.
But cancer wasn't the only ill plaguing the mayor's campaign. He recently separated from his wife of 16 years, admitting to a close relationship with another woman.
I would like to keep that as much my personal life as possible, but that is not the reason for the decision.
If the mayor has changed, clearly so too has the character of the New York Senate race. After his appearance, Hillary Clinton acknowledged the news, but refused to speculate on a new opponent.
Today, we all ought to just wish the mayor our very best and let him know that the people of the city are all behind him.
Still, even before the mayor's announcement, four-term Congressman Rick Lazio was rushing from his Capitol Hill office to New York. The pro-choice Republican is expected to be Governor Pataki's pick, and the mayor seems on board.
I called Rick Lazio and told him that if he's the candidate of the party, he can count on my help and my support.
As for the mayor, he's looking for support from a higher office.
Am I closer to God? I hope he's closer to me.
And so this Senate race, once a heavyweight bout, will now be fought by one relative unknown. But some Republicans aren't as worried as one might think. Rick Lazio carries a lot of support and little personal baggage. For a First Lady who still suffers very high negatives, the congressman could be the most dangerous opponent of all. Dan?
Diana Olick. For the real deal about this latest bombshell in the New York Senate race, we turn to veteran political reporter Bob Schieffer in Washington. Bob, what do you make of it?
Well, Dan, after all this recent turmoil, I think Giuliani recognized the obvious. It was going to be very difficult to beat Mrs. Clinton, but this decision did seem to go beyond that. Sometimes we don't really know ourselves until we face a crisis, and the man we saw today was clearly a man in crisis. But it was also a different Giuliani, someone who seemed to have taken stock of himself and was not entirely satisfied with what he had found. This once cocky politician said he had done some good things for his city, but he went on to say he realized that there were many he had left behind, and he said he wanted now to find a way to reach them. He wouldn't have said that 2 weeks ago. Just the fact that he said he now knows there are more things that are more important than politics will make him a better politician. It will also make him a better man. But that said, he has left his party in a real mess. He pushed aside all the other Republicans who wanted to run against Mrs. Clinton. Now he can't run, and there's a real question whether anyone else can mount a really serious campaign. Dan.
Bob Schieffer. Amid the growing debate over new gun safety laws, the National Rifle Association opened its annual convention today in no mood to compromise. It announced a plan to open a New York City superstore and theme restaurant featuring, and I quote, a mega interactive video firearms experience. A mega interactive firearm experience, unquote. CBS's Randall Pinkston is at the NRA meeting in North Carolina.
For the National Rifle Association, these are the best of times. 40,000 expected at this year's convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. And membership at an all-time high, 3.6 million and growing.
Congratulations, new members.
You're the strength of this association. Don't ever forget it. And you're the strength of America.
More laws won't make us safer.
By pulling out its heaviest gun in recent TV ads, the NRA is taking aim at people like 62-year-old Tom Roach of Charlotte.
The last time I fired a weapon was probably my senior year in high school.
The retired salesman joined the NRA 3 weeks ago.
I believe that the Second Amendment right is in jeopardy. I think it's something that we need to stand up for.
And that's not all.
Next, the NRA is taking its message from Main Street to the bright lights of Broadway, announcing plans for NRA Sports Blast, a new superstore in New York City, betting that virtual reality shooting and a menu of wild game will be a hit in Times Square.
It's an American institution, and we believe it ought to be more than just some rich corporations. We're going to have American citizens there through NRA Sports.
The NRA show of force comes just a year after the Columbine shootings and a week after the Million Mom March for more gun control. The big worry now is political, the upcoming November elections.
Our gun rights and the Second Amendment are truly in peril.
But with this newfound popularity, it's a safe bet the NRA won't be fading away anytime soon. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, Charlotte.
The FBI warned today of a nasty new variant of the I Love You computer virus. This one's called New Love, and it can do serious damage to computers. But it doesn't spread fast. Only a few thousand personal computers have been harmed so far. The quote, New Love infects computers through Microsoft's Outlook email program. The letters FW appear in the address line. The virus itself is in an attachment with a name ending in VBS. That's Victor Boy Safe. Don't open the VBS attachment and delete the email. On the CBS Health Watch for the first time in 8 years, the FDA held a public hearing today to defend its handling of a controversial drug. In this case, it's the diabetes drug Rezlin, linked to 63 deaths before it was pulled from the market in March. CBS's Cheryl Atkinson has long been investigating the Rezlin story and has tonight's follow-up. Cheryl?
Dan, the FDA gave its most detailed response yet to the nagging question of why it left Rezlin on the market for months after its key scientists concluded it was too dangerous to be sold. FDA management defended its decision to keep Rezlin on the market, saying the drug helped thousands of diabetics and was only withdrawn because 2 new drugs proved safer.
I would argue that taking outmoded drugs off the market, once the agency and the community at large feels that we have a safer alternative, is part of our job.
But a CBS News investigation uncovered charges that the drug's maker, Warner Lambert, failed to properly report liver problems and even pressured one researcher into changing her findings, charges the company denies. Today, Warner Lambert blamed media reports, not the drug's risks, for its withdrawal.
The individuals most hurt by these inaccuracies in the press were, in fact, the patients.
Rezlin was the source of a serious split between FDA management, who wanted to keep it on the market, and FDA scientists who wanted it pulled, like Dr. Robert Misbin.
None of us were given an opportunity to present our cases in a cogent way, and I do not understand why that was the case.
Why didn't you speak today?
I was not asked to speak.
Misbin eventually wrote Congress of his concerns. The FDA then opened an internal affairs case against him. Whether that amounts to retaliation against a whistleblower is now under congressional scrutiny. Rezlin was one of 7 drugs pulled in recent years. The FDA says that's not a signal that it's doing anything wrong. But today's hearing is evidence that it's feeling the pressure to explain its actions. Dan?
Cheryl Atkinson. Up next on the Friday CBS Evening News, a new tornado forecast. It could affect your Memorial Day travel plans. And the national disgrace in elder care. The caregivers cry for help.
Now we need to bring a wheelchair here.
In Philadelphia, sudden disaster struck at one of the city's latest riverfront development hotspots, featuring trendy restaurants and music clubs. Investigators look today for clues to the collapse of a pier that dumped patrons of a new open-air nightclub into the Delaware River. The collapse last night came without warning, killing at least 3 people and injuring 37 others. In Tampa, Florida, a massive fire, possibly sparked by a power line, engulfed an entire construction site complex. Thick smoke tied up traffic for miles and forced hundreds of people to evacuate the area. Spring storms were still rampaging in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states after a night of thunder, lightning, hail, and hurricane-force wind knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds were stranded overnight at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. United Airlines alone canceled 400 flights. The tornado-weary plains and Midwest got a bit of a break today. But if the tornado experts are right, the respite in the Midwest won't last long. Correspondent Cynthia Bowers has the nasty twister forecast on the CBS Weather Watch.
These breathtaking images, according to the people who captured them Wednesday in Nebraska, may be just a preview of what's on the horizon.
Memorial Day, and that'll be our next big chance to chase. It's going to be pretty serious somewhere.
Brian Sturtz has been tracking tornadoes for 14 years. He uses Weather Service data and computer models like these that enable him to predict with reasonable certainty that this Memorial Day weekend will be a rough one in parts of the Plain states.
This will be a very severe storm that's going to track.
Sturtz and his partner Jeff Petrowski drove more than 700 miles chasing this storm, using intuition and instinct to ferret out which cells in an enormous weather system were most likely to erupt.
It's something different every time. And just as you think you know all about the weather, that's when you learn you don't know anything.
In the vast reaches of Tornado Alley, even something as big as a twister can be difficult to find. There are hundreds of chasers out there, but the best are said to have a sense of storm, always on the lookout for the next big one. And neither man had ever seen anything like this huge tornado that ripped through Oklahoma City last year, killing 44 people. The two stalked and filmed this storm for more than 8 hours, fueled by adrenaline and increasing anxiety.
I was trying to think of all the bad things that have happened in the Oklahoma City area and tornadoes and severe weather, and I was like, this could be the meanest.
As to why anyone would get so close to one of the most powerful forces in nature, these two storm chasers claim it's more than just the thrill, it's also the chance to provide early warning to the people in harm's way. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Tulsa.
The CBS Market Watch shows Wall Street investors spooked about the prospect of rising interest rates were not in a buying mood today. The Dow Industrials closed down 150 points. The Nasdaq lost 148. Next on the CBS Evening News, a boy cruises into a custody fight in a foreign court. Sound familiar? It is to thousands of Americans. China's communist leaders cut a big trade deal today with the European Union. Officials in Beijing celebrated the agreement in which the European Union endorses China's entry into the World Trade Organization, and European companies get greater access to Chinese markets. The Chinese may very well see this deal as a way of pressuring the U.S. Congress to pass a bill normalizing U.S.-China trade relations, which is up for a vote next week. The father in an international custody battle over a young boy won a round in court today. The father is just one of thousands of American parents waging custody battles in foreign countries. But as CBS's Richard Roth reports, unlike the Elian Gonzalez case, their struggles rarely make headlines.
Sound familiar? Here's a father fighting in a foreign court to get back his son. But Paul Marinkovich and his son are both American, and the court is in Scotland. Gabriel Marinkovich was 6 years old and living in Texas when his mother took him to Sweden, then Spain, and eventually to this house outside Edinburgh, where police tracked them down. She's now facing extradition and U.S. felony charges of parental abduction. And though Marinkovich has a Texas court order granting him sole custody, till now he's not even been allowed to see his son. A Scottish judge has been keeping Gabriel, who's now almost 10, in foster care.
Why is this? How could this happen? You know, I'm this child's father. You know, that right was given to me by God.
The State Department says right now it's following more than 1,000 custody battles in foreign countries. But But that's just a fraction of the number of children abducted to where the long arm of American law has a very limited reach. More than 10,000 American children overseas, according to congressional estimates, are separated from an American parent with a custody claim, even though an international treaty is supposed to help bring the children home.
When a U.S. parent's child is taken, they think somebody in the government is going to take me by the hand and tell me how to do this, and that's not necessarily the case.
Not even if you work for the government. Since Tom Johnson's ex-wife took their daughter Amanda to Sweden 6 years ago, he's been allowed to see her for only a few hours at a time, despite a joint custody agreement. And he's a lawyer at the State Department.
American left-behind parents are up against the full weight of foreign governments with virtually no help from anybody.
When Paul Marinkovich finally sees his son, it'll be the first time since a day on the water off the coast of Texas, when Gabriel made his father promise they'd spend more time together soon.
I think somewhere in that little boy's mind there's a broken promise that hasn't been kept. That gnaws at me every day.
That boating trip was almost 4 years ago, on Gabriel's last day in America. Richard Roth, CBS News, Edinburgh, Scotland.
Next, Eye on America, investigating in depth. They care for the elderly, but does anyone care about them? Tonight's Eye on America is part of an ongoing CBS News investigation of the crisis in elder care. We give you a look tonight at the forgotten people, unsung heroes, who care for the aging at home, often at great expense, financial and personal. Thalia Shuris reports pressure is building on Congress to provide at least some relief for the caregivers.
Okay, now we need to bring a wheelchair here. And
it's been 16 years now since Carolyn Johnson gave up her job and her home to take care of her mother, Florence. At 81, the frailties of Florence's age are compounded by multiple sclerosis.
Finger's not working too well today, huh?
Florence can't bathe or clothe herself and needs someone with her all the time.
They wanted to put her in a nursing home initially, but I resisted that. And the trade-off has been she's lived longer.
Many Americans agree with Carolyn's decision. Today, 1 in 4 households must find care for an elderly relative, and the majority of them are choosing to take care of that relative at home.
I'm always on call for whatever her needs might be.
But that comes at a very real cost. Carolyn's career is in a shambles. Her income has fallen from $40,000 a year to just $6,000. And a recent study found home caregivers like Carolyn typically lose a staggering $650,000 in missed wages and Social Security and pension benefits.
Caregiving has become my career.
And because it's quickly becoming the career of so many Americans, Washington is starting to face the issue. There are some proposals that would help. Among them, an administration plan earmarking $125 million for support services and a $3,000 a year tax credit for caregivers.
Those are great proposals. They are a step in the right direction. By no means would they address the entire long-term care problem.
Home care advocate Janice Jackson says much more is needed to fund relief for the caregiver and home aid services because Medicare and Medicaid don't cover home caregiving.
There is more public funding, particularly federal funding, for nursing home care than there is for care in the home.
Does that make sense?
No, it's backwards. It's backwards. People want to stay at home. It allows them to remain independent.
I like my independence.
And it's something 81-year-old Betty Herbst is not about to give up, despite diabetes and Alzheimer's.
Some days it's overwhelming. You need to be in 5 places at once.
Her daughter Mary is able to care for her mother with help from her employer, AT&T.
Give me just a second.
Mary gets flexible hours without being penalized.
If something happens and I call it over and say, I gotta go, there's no questions asked.
But that's the exception. Less than 1/4 of large companies provide elder care assistance of some sort.
Enjoy your day, okay?
Leaving Carolyn and millions of others like her feeling that while they're caring for loved ones, no one's caring for them. In Baltimore, I'm Thalia Ashuris for Eye on America.
The difference between men and women, it's a long-running study, and in case you hadn't heard about it, here's the latest. Scientists have thought that humans' natural response to stress is fight or flight. stand up to a challenge or run away because they mostly studied men. Now they say women tend to respond to stress by looking first to their children, then talking out problems with friends. Women ask directions generally, men don't. Women also live longer with fewer heart problems. It turns out women have more of a stress-busting hormone called oxytocin, also known as the cuddle hormone. And God bless it. That's part of our world tonight. Bob Schieffer will be along Sunday morning with Face the Nation. Then Sunday evening, 60 Minutes.
Is this bishop putting us on when he says he doesn't really like religious people? No, he really doesn't. And he'll tell you why Sunday on 60 Minutes.
And we invite you to join us again Monday for the CBS Evening News. Until then, Dan Rather reporting from CBS News World Headquarters in New York. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Get top dollar for one of your favorite toys on the Saturday Early Show. Experience CBS News.